Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor Kulbhushan Chandel from Himachal Pradesh University, Shimla. Today we are going to talk on module Building Collaborative Relationships from paper Organizational Change and Development. Let me see that what we are going to learn from this module. We will be discussing the dynamics of collaborations. We'll study the various benefits and barriers to collaborations. Through this module, we will be understanding the collaborative process. We will be understanding mediators and the tasks performed by the mediators. We will be studying different types of collaborations. And finally, we will discuss service integrations. The problems were so massive that no one entity had the knowledge, resources, or skills to solve them alone. Problems are as serious as crime, pollution, traffic, and natural disasters. Do not restrict themselves to one geographical regions or political boundaries. Low-income individuals and families do not need financial assistance alone. They also need training, transportation, childcare, and healthcare. Although the problems in the organizations are trying to address do not only arrange themselves into neat classifications, the organizations often act if the problems can be solved in isolation. Francis Hesselbein, the president of Peter Drucker Foundation, stated that for the first time in the recent history, government is saying that it cannot alone provide the social services to our people's needs. Business is saying it cannot deliver the services government is relinquishing, and non-profit or the social sector is telling us it cannot single-handedly meet the societal needs being ceded to it by the government and business. It is evident to all engaged in addressing our social and human needs that collaboration is the order of the day. Dynamics of collaboration. One of the difficulties with any reform is creating a shared language to describe the new reform activities. Many individuals, they are using the terms coordination, cooperation, partnerships, collaborations, and service integrations interchangeably. Conrad in 1996 gave the conceptual framework that defines these terms and places them on a continuum moving towards service integration. Cooperation and coordination. Cooperation and coordination is an informal and loosely organized attempt by autonomous agencies and programs to work together to change procedures and structures to increase the success of all affected programs. Collaboration. Collaboration increases the formalities of relationships with still autonomous agencies and programs working together on a common goal. Consolidation. Consolidation is an umbrella organization with single leadership in which various functions are centralized with line authority retained by categorical divisions. Integration. A single authority which operates in collaboration and is multi-purpose and can be generally located. Categorical lines are transparent with blended funding in which one entity has sole responsibility for management, operational decisions, and results. In many ways, The processes for building collaborative relationship will be similar whether trying to build these relationship with another agency or with multiple agencies or with many organizations from different sectors. The only difference will be the number of stakeholders involved, level of interdependence between them, and the degree of formalization required. Barbara Gray also developed a scheme for understanding collaborative relationships in 1989. According to Gray, there are two primary reasons to collaborate. One, to resolve conflict. The parties attempts to change an adversarial relationship into a shared explorations for solutions that allows the stakeholders to have their interests represented. And then second one is to advance shared visions. With this approach, the collective good of all the stakeholders will be advanced. It needs the identification and coordination of a diverse set of stakeholders, each of which holds some resources. Many intergovernmental and public private partnerships fall in this category. A variety of factors are involved in trying to achieve collaborations. For example, there must be some level of interdependence among the stakeholders for true collaborations to occur. In situations where collaboration is needed to produce solutions that none of the stakeholders is working independently could achieve. In some cases, the parties will not initially reorganize the extent of interdependence. Therefore, the first step is to build collaborative relationships so that the stakeholders are entangled and the reason for their need for each other in solving the problems are found out. In addition to being interdependent, successful collaborators must deal constructively with differences. One needs to be wary of tendency to assume that different interpretations are opposing interpretations. Collaborations means joint ownership of decisions and collective responsibility of implementing those decisions. They negotiate a new set of relationships among themselves and restructure rules governing how they will interact with each other. In addition to this, the collaboration must serve the interests of the stakeholders. The collaborative relationship must be reciprocal, one or the collaboration may be damaged. Gaining the commitment, support, and satisfaction of all stakeholders is often a challenge. Collaborative process. There are various barriers to collaborations, and an effective model of collaborating can help in getting out of these hurdles. Gray in 1989 gave three-phase model which has been successfully used by the organizations in building collaborative relationships. The model ties with the 8-step change model already discussed in the previous modules. Collaborative process that includes problem setting, direction setting, and implementations. Problem setting. As with the developmental model, the first step of problem setting is the base of all the remaining steps. Gray suggested that unless these tasks are accomplished during problem setting, subsequent efforts to prepare for and engage in negotiations will be hampered. Thus, the task can be thought of as important outcomes of the problem setting phase and as critical preconditions for the next phase. There is a difference between the 8-step change management model is that the finding of a skilled convener who has the respect of and influence with stakeholder groups. The convener's challenge is to help the members shift their relationships from bargaining and negotiating relationships to collaborative ones. The problem setting phase deals with many aspects that includes common definition of the problem. It must find overlap in how parties define the major issues of concern. The problem must be rooted with interdependence of the parties, commitment to collaborate. There must be commitment from stakeholders. Then it comes identify key stakeholders. It should include those groups whose expertise is essential to create a composite picture of the problems and solutions. Then it is to establish legitimacy of stakeholders. It must be perceived as being legitimate, meaning there is affected by the actions of other stakeholders and they have expertise, financial or informational resources, and power to veto the group's work. Then to find skilled conveyor, it cannot be suspected of bias and must believe in the power of collaboration. Generally, it invites other stakeholders to participate and must have the influence of inducing them to commit to the process. Identification of resource. It must identify the resources needed to launch the work. Resources may be needed to hire project coordination, pay for mediators, and so on. Then second one is direction setting. In direction setting phase, the stakeholders begin to develop the common sense of purpose and direction. They also establish the process through which they will engage in their collaborations. When there are participants who have had previous adversarial relationship, it is especially important to establish and adhere to the previously agreed on ground rules. In addition to the establishing ground rules, members would be well advised to practice the political skills, the tactics of consultation, rational persuasions, inspirational appeals, and exchange tactics are particularly appropriate in building collaborative relationships across organizational lines. In direction settings, the following issues are dealt. To establish ground rules, it must reach agreement on how they will be interacting with each other. There may be a need to establish processes such as allowing alternative representatives, selecting meeting sites, handling confidential informations, using outside experts, handling relationships with the media, and so on. Then it comes agenda setting. It must identify the issues to be discussed so that the varied stakeholders' interests are represented. Then the organized subgroups. It may need to establish subgroups to study the issues. It is wise to create subgroups if the numbers of issues are large. Then joint information search. It is helpful in reaching agreement in the nature and extent of the problem and in identifying the proposed solutions. Explore options. It is best to generate a variety of options, especially with multi-party collaborations, since it is unlikely that a single option will satisfy all. Reaching agreement. There is a need to reach consensus on the solutions. These are generally finalized in written form. Then third one, that is implementation. In the final step of implementation, it is especially critical for the collaborators to pay particular attention to obtain the support of the constituent groups and those individuals or groups needed to implement the agreement. As an agreement made by the group of individuals, the fulfill Implementation of that agreement depends on the goodwill of the numerous persons who were not directly involved in the process. The implementation phase deals with the various factors. It is dealing with constituencies. It must convince the constituent groups that the agreement is the best they could score. Then, to establish structure, it must determine the level of effort needed for implementation. It will depend on the degree of change required and the availability of the resources to implement the changes. Then it is monitoring agreement. It must establish process so organizations will follow through on commitments. Collaboration is especially susceptible to collapse during implementation. Mediator and facilitators. Collaboration operates as a model of shared power, and when there are major inequities among various parties, it is difficult to establish collaboration. When inequities occurs, the powerful parties have to either be willing to share their powers. This is frequently used in the form of mobilizing others through such activities as protesting, engaging in letter writing campaigns, speaking at meetings, and going to media and so on. Some collaborations they are best handled with a third party mediator or facilitators. The mediators helps the parties work out their differences and construct a mutually acceptable solution. The mediators are involved in proposing agreements. The facilitators assist the parties in a constructive dialogue, and their goals are to be promoted for promoting the understandings among the parties. They often set the agenda and create an atmosphere of openness and trust and manage the decisions. When the parties have contentious relationship in the past, and when there are significant differences in power, it is helpful to have a mediator than a facilitators. The main tasks of the mediators are assessing overall readiness to collaborate, which include determination of the interests of the parties, then assessment of the self-interest, then second, getting parties to the table, which includes expertise, leverage, heightening awareness of cause, then creating standards for fairness. Then third one, that is minimizing the resistance, which include creating safe climate and displaying empathy. The next one is ensuring effective representations, which include ensuring appropriate stakeholders' participation and helping less powerful stakeholders to organize. And then it comes establishing climate of trust, modeling openness, optimism, and perseverance, then designing and managing the negotiation process and managing data and getting consensus, transmitting information, proposing concessions, formulating solutions, and highlighting the consequences of non-agreements. Types of collaboration. There are many forms of collaborations in which the organizations can participate. For many years, the collaborations arrangements were such as cross-agency referrals, joint lobbying, and resource fairs. With the decline of economic resources, there is a newer breed of collaborations, generally known as partnerships. Although the general information on collaboration is relevant for these new arrangements, each form of partnership has its own challenge. Then the types of collaborations, which include multi-party partnerships, intergovernmental partnerships, then partnership with the faith community, and public-private partnerships. The various forms of partnerships are the intergovernmental partnerships. The main incentive for most intergovernmental partnerships is to reduce duplication of efforts and streamlining the process for consumers. There are both type of partnerships, horizontal and vertical. The horizontal partnerships are between agencies within the same levels of government. The vertical partnerships are those in which local, state, and federal agencies they are collaborating. The interagency collaboration involves the participants in designing and implementation of the partnership design. Special attention has to be paid in the power disparities and in making sure that the less powerful are listened to and are respected. Public-private partnership. Partnerships between governmental agencies and private organizations have been in existence for many years. Corporations have also worked with the governmental entities to promote their own image. Within the human service arena, public-private partnerships have increased due to the combination of welfare reform and employer difficulty in recruiting entry-level employees. Then partnership with the faith community. Faith-based organizations have traditionally been involved in providing the services such as crisis, interventions, food pantries, and substance abuse programs for low-income individuals. There is still some uncertainty about the constitutionality of religious organizations receiving government funding. Then multi-party partnership. In many partnerships, wide ranges of stakeholders are involved, including representatives from government, religious organizations, and corporations. The challenges with these non-profit organizations do not share common perspective and language and have significant power differences which also exist. It is often difficult for all the parties to have the same level of investment and engagements. Successful partnership should have some principles for their success, like it must have a clear goal. Partnership should define goals at the outset to ensure understanding among the partners, to guide them through obstacles and challenges. It should involve families and accounts for their needs and preferences. Families are the ultimate consumers to childcare and for services to be successful. They must address their needs, are broad-based and include stakeholders from beginning. They are the most effective when they draw from the broad range of perspectives, resources, and expertise. It should involve powerful campaigns that make their initiative visible to the public. Success requires leaders who act as change agents by clearly communicating the goals of the partnership and building a broad base of support. It should regularly measure their results. Measuring results regularly allow partnerships to assess what they are achieving and what changes should be made to make the partnership most effective. Establishing clear governance structure that define partner role and responsibilities. It is important to define what various roles the partners will play and to make sure that all partners understand and accept those roles. Set and adhere to a set of ground rules that guide partnership in the work, and then they are flexible and adapt to the changing conditions and resources, and then they work to champions that make their initiative visible to the public, and they must be regularly measuring their results, maintain momentum and sustain their work over the period of time. Service integration requires a greater degree of collaboration than other forms. It generally suggests that the effort to reduce the boundaries between categorically defined services taking place within the one organization providing multiple services, or between categorically defined services, or between separate organizations and agencies providing related services. Service integration usually includes a case and system focus on the whole family rather than individual co-locations of services and staff, joint and cross training of staff, tightened referral systems, and an increase in preventive services. Decentralization is the general thrust of service integration, which can result in greater service fragmentation and ultimate inequity throughout the larger service system. Whenever the services are decentralized, a special efforts must be made to coordinate among the programs and investment of time that is frequently not made in human service organizations. A redefinition of professional role often comes in service integration, and workers to be effective in this new environment. Problems related to confidentiality and blended funding must also overcome if service integration initiatives are to be effective and long lasting. Suggestions such as using informed consent documents, creating shared databases through internet access, and seeking waivers from categorical funding are beginning steps to address these issues, but ultimately system changes must be made to accompany the changes in service delivery. Let's summarize what we have learned in this module. We came to know from this module that the problems were so massive that no one entity had the knowledge, resources, or skill to solve them alone. Problems are as serious as crime, pollution, traffic, and natural disasters, which do not restrict themselves to one geographical regions or political boundaries. Low-income individuals and families do not need financial assistance alone, but they also need training, transportation, child care, and health care. Although the problems in the organizations are trying to address do not arrange themselves into the neat classifications, the organizations often act as if the problems could be solved in isolation. Francis Hesselbein, the president of Peter Drucker Foundation, stated that for the first time in the recent history, government is saying that it cannot alone provide the social services to our people's need. Simultaneously, business is also saying that it cannot deliver the services. Government is relinquishing, and non-profit or the social sector is telling that it cannot single-handedly meet the societal needs being ceded to it by the government and business. We also came to know from this module that a variety of factors are involved in trying to achieve collaborations. For example, there must be some level of interdependence among the stakeholders for true collaborations which occurs. In situations where collaboration is needed to produce solutions that none of the stakeholder is working independently could achieve. In some cases, the parties will not initially recognize or reorganize the extent of interdependence. Therefore, the first step is to build collaborative relationships so that the stakeholders are entangled and the reasons for their need for each other in solving the problems could be found out. There are many forms of collaborations in which the organizations can participate. For many years, the collaborations arrangements were such as cross-agency referrals, joint lobbying, and resource fairs. With the decline of economic resources, there is a newer breed of collaborations, generally known as partnerships. Although the journal information on collaboration is relevant for these new arrangements, each form of partnership has its own challenges. Thank you.